welcome everybody. Good afternoon. You are joining us for the SATs Unlocked, or as I call it, SATs Unlocked, Unique Insights for Year 6 webinar. We are broadcasting here from, we're Zooming here from Learning by Questions Towers in Lancashire. And I'm telling you what, it is blowing an absolute hoolie here. And I've been catching up with Sophie, who's much further south than me, Lindsay, who's a little bit further south than me, but the wind seems to be crazy everywhere. So I guess you guys, wherever you're tuning in from, have probably had a pretty crazy day, because kids, they just seem to go as wild as the wind, don't they, on these windy days? So I really appreciate everybody who has stayed with us this evening. And of course, if you're watching the recording, the wind's probably not affecting you at all, unless we're deep in storm territory. So I'm just going to go around and introduce you to everybody who's going to be presenting with me tonight. So I've got my wonderful co-host, Daryl Keane. He's sharp, he is smart, and he is a former SATs marker, and he is our primary maths leader extraordinaire. There's Daryl. Everybody give him a silent round of applause. Also with Daryl, we have the amazing Kate Brindle. Kate is insane, one of our insanely talented authors, and she's our massive heart, huge-hearted primary English lead. So everybody, you are in very safe hands this evening in terms of LBQ. I also have, you can't see her because she's on the chat, Gillian. She's from our teaching and learning consultants team. There are people who look after you. Yeah, literally a little bit of TLC if you join the LBQ family. She's there. She's a former teacher. She's there to help you as well. And Paul's on the Q&A. You can't see him. Paul is basically in my team, and he's my conscience. And he basically is like slacking me through, going, don't say that, all the way through. And then the big guns, why you've all come today. So we've got my new best friend for life, Lindsay Grigg. Now, Lindsay is an assistant head from Willow Wood in Cheshire, in a rather challenging area, you were saying to us, Lindsay, in an estate there. And Lindsay actually came to last year's SATs Springboard webinar that we had. So she was sat where you are right now, and here she is, famous almost. Lindsay, what did you expect when you were tuning in this time last year?
It was just, get it? I got it, but it was just to know that I'm not the only one in this boat, that there's Year 6 teachers all around the country that are feeling the same way, that are going through the same things, and just to find out that there's something fantastic out there to help us all.
Yeah, it's a huge burden. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is focused on the children and how we're supporting the children. But some of it is actually focused on us as Year 6 teachers and, the anxiety that you guys are feeling. And we have emails at all times of the day and night, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. So people are staying awake at night, really stressing about this, especially as we move into the next year. And then she needs no introduction, but I will give her one. It is Sophie Bartlett, Missy B. What she doesn't know about SATs past papers is not worth knowing. Sophie, how are you doing? Have you had a good day?
Yeah, really good, thank you. Apart from the wind, obviously, as you said, whips the children up, but I've just about got through the day fine.
Tree comes through this room while we're doing this webinar, I will not be surprised. There have been some serious moans and groans from this building. So now I've introduced everybody. What can you expect from today before we kick off? Well, we promised you insights on the poster, and we are going to do, as Sophie is here to walk us through some amazing past paper analysis. We're going to look back into the previous SATs papers. What can we infer from those that are going to tell us maybe what might be coming up this year? We're also not just going to look about what happened in the past, but because of some of the unique and exclusive insights that Learning by Question has, we can actually tell you what's happening in other Year 6 classrooms right now with the diagnostics we've been running. And that, again, is going to hopefully make you feel like you are not alone. And maybe some of the things you're experiencing are also happening in other classrooms. Part of that is we're going to show you some benchmarking questions, some questions we've run with thousands of other Year 6 pupils right now that maybe you will try with your class so you know where they are. We're going to speak more to Lindsay about what it's really like at the coalface, what she's been doing, what ideas and tricks and things about confidence and attitude and how you make that feel good in the classroom. And then we're also going to show you some practical tools, some things that we've got here at Learning by Questions that you can take away and you can start using in your classrooms from tomorrow. All right, without further ado, SATs Unlocked for Unique Insights into Year 6. Now, if you work with me, I'm Heather, and I love a metaphor. And today's metaphor is going to be a skyscraper. And you guys don't know how lucky you are, because last year's metaphor was a slow cooker. So we have really improved things. I mean, this is practically the mission impossible of SATs webinars. So we're going to build our amazing SAT success skyscraper. Now, what do we need to focus on first of all? Well, we're going to start right down where no one can see things in the foundations. What we want to make sure is that we don't have wobbly foundations for our Year 6 class. So those early year group objectives, those content domains are really, really solid. Now, Lindsay, way before you came on the SATs webinar last year, back in the dim and distant dark past, how would you do that? How would you check what your class knows and doesn't know? Because I think a lot of people out here will be in a similar vein.
Yeah, definitely. We'd always run, obviously a past SATs paper, but the difficulty with that, and what I found was that obviously there's a lot of curriculum, Year 6 curriculum content on the past SATs papers, and especially this year, there's going to be, even more gaps from COVID. So it's just so hard, because I'm a real advocate for children's mental health and well-being. So I'm very much, saying to the children all the time, it doesn't matter how you do, just give it a go. We're going to highlight what the gaps in your learning, we'll address them. But, we're all only human, and these are young people that, the children that can't answer the questions on there, they know they keep turning the pages, they flip to the back for the harder questions, see what they can't do. And, when you see those shoulders slump in the classroom, it doesn't matter how much, you try and big them up, they know that they can't do. So reassuring them doesn't work. And the big thing for me is I feel that running the SATs papers really, really damages their confidence. And what we're trying to do, especially with we talked about, in the chat, so many gaps in their learning, we're trying to big them up and, and build that confidence. So I know you're going to go through in a different way with LBQ that, I'll say later, how it's changed my life. Yeah. I just wish I had it sooner, because it is hard. Whatever you say to these children, whatever you do to build that confidence, they're still having to sit a paper where they don't know the content of a lot of it. So it's tough.
I think that's so important, Lindsay, because when we're talking about knowledge here, and a lot of us will be interested in how we're implying this knowledge and the learning and so on, you're also, as Year 6 teachers, managing confidence in the classroom, managing little person's emotions and how they're feeling about things. And I think one of the things that we're going to take away from today is that confidence is an absolutely key ingredient, and we don't want to lose that right at the start of the year, just as we start to do this. But how else can Year 6 teachers actually find out where those gaps are without returning to the photocopying machine, photocopying some more past papers, and finding and running that, knowing full well what the flaws are with that? Well, one of the smart ways that you might want to do this, and a lot of people do this, is they look back at the previous past papers and they go, okay, what's come up before? So what's likely to come up again? And so tell me where to start. These might be an area where I want to start with my class. And there is nobody better to guide us through those than Sophie. So, Sophie, can you take us through the last couple of years of SATs? What happened? And what are these foundational domains that we think might be likely to appear?
Okay, we'll start with maths, because that's my favourite. So in maths, there are 9 content domains. I'm sure lots of you have seen this before. So we've had 6 sets of SATs papers since the new curriculum came out. And these are 9 content domains. And I've analysed the proportion of the paper that's taken up by each content domain. So that's across all 3 papers, the arithmetic and both the reasoning. Now, obviously, the arithmetic paper is purely calculations and FDP. So that's all fractions, decimals and percentages. So that's already going to make those a bit bigger anyway. But you can quite clearly see here that calculations has been consistently the most common topic since 2016, with the next most common being fractions, decimals and percentages. In fact, collectively this year, it took up nearly 60% of the paper just from those content domains. Wow. So had the lowest pass mark this year at 51%. So quite interestingly, theoretically, to pass the maths sats paper is possible by exclusively knowing content from calculations and FDP. Obviously, you'd have to get most of the questions correct, but it just goes to show how much of the paper is actually dedicated towards those two content domains. If you break it down by year group, again, nearly 60% of the questions from all three papers within the maths set are from the years 3, 4, and 5 curricula. So again, theoretically, it's possible to pass the maths paper without even touching the year 6 curriculum, which I always think
blows me away. That
yeah, it just goes to show, and I know all Key Stage 2 teachers say, it goes to show how important the earlier years are when it comes to building on ready for year 6. So again, it's safe to assume that next year the same content domains are going to appear in a similar proportion. So the 4 operations and FDP, which we know come up loads in the papers just from looking through them, but it's quite nice to see it in numbers to show how much of the paper is actually dedicated to it. And I can never fit in the whole curriculum before May, particularly this year. It's going to be a real challenge. So I always think if I've got to leave topics till after SAT, it's going to be your position and direction and your statistics and things that don't really come up very much. So that's the maths paper. With the grammar paper, the 2 most common content domains are G1 and G5. So again, since 2016, this has pretty much been the case. G1 being grammatical terms or word classes, and G5 being punctuation. So again, I think actually the same pass mark as maths. It was 51% pass mark this year. So again, theoretically, it would be possible to pass that paper just from those 2 content domains. I know obviously that's quite a reach again, because they'd have to answer every single question correct, but also goes to show how much of the paper is dedicated to those 2 content domains. And yeah, I think it'll probably repeat a similar pattern next year. Punctuation and word classes, grammatical terms seems to be, really popular amongst the papers. So really practicing those is key. And then we've got reading, which is obviously a little bit trickier to analyse reading, nowhere near as nice and neat as maths and grammar, because anyone that's done SATs papers for more than a year will know that inference is huge in reading papers, and actually this year took up nearly half of the paper just from inference questions. But we all know that just because you teach a lesson on inference on a text about frogs doesn't mean the children are any better at answering inference questions about something else. So this one is a little bit trickier, but it's just interesting to know, I don't know, the kind of question stems that might be thrown to the children, and what impression do you get is quite a common one. So that's usually an inference type question. So exposing children to the question stems can be handy. But yeah, retrieval and inference are the most common when it comes to reading. And then looking at the word counts was quite interesting as well. So I think this year was the second wordiest paper, just looking at the words on the extracts rather than the questions. So you can see since 2016, I've got the total of the word counts at the bottom. And then my favourite bit of analysis, which is the genre of the text, because anyone that came last year, and I probably said the year before on Twitter, I've been convinced that a poetry extract is going to appear on a SATs paper, probably like since 2019, because I thought, especially there's been a big emphasis on poetry these last couple of years. And as you can see, poetry is in blue. It's only come up once in 2018. Every other year we've had 2 fiction extracts, and we usually have 1 non-fiction. So I think I said this last year, I'll eat my hat if poetry does not appear next year. I just feel like it has to. So if you want to focus your revision anywhere for reading, maybe chuck in an extra poem than you might have done before. That's what I'm going to do anyway.
Or next year, we will definitely start this webinar with Sophie eating a hat.
Yes, perhaps. So yeah, that is the analysis for reading. So I think for the kind of the key takeaways for all of those is for maths, focusing on your 4 operations and FDP, grammar, focusing on punctuation and grammatical terms and word classes, and then just having in your head that for reading, any retrieval skills and inference question stems would be important to focus on, and possibly, surely, poetry.
Anyone who wants to send in a hat that they think is particularly tasty, Sophie's available for next year, unless of course poetry comes out. Sophie, that's brilliant. We have whizzed through that in record time, and I know everyone's like, oh wow, can we get copies of this? And you will. Everybody who's signed up to the webinar will get a copy of this video, and you will get the slides as well. And also Sophie did us an excellent breakdown blog on both of those papers, on English and on maths, on both the English papers. So if you want want to look at those at your leisure, you can do on our hub, and we'll share these slides as well. So here we've had two ways of doing this. We can do to get those wobbly foundations right. We can run a SATs paper, but we know it's not ideal. We don't want to damage confidence. We don't want to be testing on things that we have not taught yet. So ideally, a kind of way of diagnostics would not include any year 6 material, but maybe it increases in year 6 material as we move through the year. And yes, we've got some, signposts from the past papers like Sophie has given us, but as Sophie and I, full disclaimer, we have no crystal ball. We do not know for sure what will come up. But as we get more towards the SATs, wouldn't it be great if we were running diagnostics that were in just the right ratio for the exams, for the big day? It would put more weighting on those on our wobbly foundations to begin with. So we know that we've got that really fundamental early years knowledge that we can be building on. Now, where would we get the perfect diagnostic from? Well, it's brilliant because we can now introduce you to SAT Springboard 23-24. Now, previously, when we've done this, we've used SAT Springboard as a way of talking to you all and sharing great ideas and supporting one another through SATs. But this year, we've actually got ourselves together and we've created a perfect set of diagnostics that get you around these issues. Now, Kate, lovely Kate, is with us. And she's going to tell us a little bit about these diagnostics so you could all have access to. She's going to introduce them to us now. Kate, walk us through them. I do love them.
So our new diagnostic question sets, we've called them springboards. Each contain 20 questions, and they're all based on Sophie's analysis of the SATs papers. So the content domains in each diagnostic are weighted in similar proportions to the SATs papers. And we've got 12 diagnostic question sets for GPS, and we've got 12 for maths as well. In both GPS and maths, the first few diagnostics focus on the content objectives from years 2, 3, 4, and 5. But as you move through the course of 12, more year 6 content's gradually introduced. So by our springboards 9 or 10, the year group weightings are now also in a similar proportion to the SATs papers, as well as those content domain weightings. And like all LBQ's question sets, these diagnostics can be run in exam mode, which means without any feedback, or they can be run in learning mode. And it's that learning mode that provides pupils with instant feedback to any incorrect answer and a bit of guidance on how to get the right answer on the retry. And it's that feedback, and we are really proud of our feedback at LBQ, it's that feedback that gives our pupils confidence when learning from their mistakes. And the teacher can still see which areas the pupils have difficulties with, no matter which mode you run it in. So I think we've got a little look at a matrix of pupil answers here. Thank you, Daryl. And we can see straight away, and you can see in real time as well, how your pupils are doing. So on this matrix, we can see the strengths in this class on questions 1 and 2 and 5, nice dark green boxes there. So the colours indicate areas of difficulty. So if we click that question 4, a lot of areas on our matrix are clickable, so you can have a look at the responses and the question. We can see straight away that the one that was causing them difficulties early on there is a question about vertical and horizontal lines. So these pupils probably just need a quick revision of that vocab there. Our matrix is also really useful for seeing how individual pupils approach the diagnostics or question sets in general. So we could have a little look at Abigail there. She's only attempted questions that she's totally sure she'll get right. So she could be encouraged to answer all the questions and reminder that it is absolutely fine to make mistakes. We love amber answers at LBQ. They're showing us learning has happened. Thanks, Heather.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Okay, just to recap, because it's been a long day and it has been windy. So I'm just going to recap so we know what we've just been looking at. So what we've developed is the perfect diagnostic. So what you don't need to do now is panic that you need to get through all the year 6 curriculum. All you need to do is run these diagnostics because the year 6 curriculum is beautifully weaved in and increases in its amount as you move through the following year. You can see the gaps in real time. So you're getting that QLA without burning the midnight oil. Get everything off the kitchen table. I need to do QLA every 3 days. You don't need to worry about that anymore. And so it's making sure that you've got those early foundational skills covered. If you've got a subject lead or someone who's over your shoulder going, why have you not started this year 6 topic, you can go, well, because I can see that they don't understand the year 3, year 4 objective. So it's absolutely pointless when we start. So it's giving lots of strength to your elbow, everybody. Now, I noticed some people said, do you print these off? No, this is all online. So you can see that QLA is done for you instantly. And you can run some of this, you can take some of this for half a term and you get the first 3 diagnostics completely free, both in maths and another 3 diagnostics in GPS. So imagine what you're going to learn about your class, straight away, that's going to be able to really guide where you're going to go next with your SATs this year. And every cohort is different. So every time you run this diagnostic, it's going to give you a very different result, depending on where you are. All right, so we've dealt with our wobbly foundations. That's fantastic. And now we want to build from the ground up. So we're returning to our metaphor of our enormous skyscraper. So the way that we build up is we start to look at those gaps and we want to start filling those gaps. Now, I did mention this, Lindsay, the QLA, the midnight hours. Yeah. Tell me, how did you, before you had LBQ and before we knew one another and everything, how did you do the QLA? How did you know where your children were up to in terms of their gaps?
It is exactly how you've said. I'd have to complete the question level analysis, but a lot of time it would take, it would just take ages. And obviously school day's busy, so I'd end up doing it at home. And as you said, sheets all over the kitchen table, trying to find out where the gaps are. Once you found the gaps, it's then, I spend ages having to find the resources to plug those gaps. And obviously because the children have different gaps, it was finding so many resources, and no sooner as I tackled those gaps and addressed those, I'd then be giving them another test to do, and then I'd be doing another, QLA to find the new gaps that they've got. I always say it was quite stressful, the pressure, it was exhausting, and again, it was just children going through SATs paper after SATs paper after SATs paper, and, and it's not good. It's not good for them or us, as practitioners.
Yeah, I mean, just do a shout out in the comments if you know that feeling of doing that QLA into the night. I mean, just imagining massive pieces of paper, sellotaped, and you're drawing what we're seeing there now, just happening live, and you've got your coloured pens. Although, to be fair, we all love a coloured pen, don't we? So what happens then, Lindsay? You can still get coloured pens, but just for your own personal enjoyment. So after you got LBQ, Lindsay, how did that change things for you? How does it change for you as a person, as a teacher? Absolutely. And how did it change for the staff?
Oh, absolute game changer. And this is when I smile, the real genuine smile comes through. An absolute game changer for both me, for my colleagues, for the children as well. It saves so much time. It's the fact that, as Kate said before, you've got the matrix there in front of you during the lesson, and the gaps are there highlighted in real time, which is incredible. So, and the fact that I've done it before where I've had the matrix up in class, and my children love the pause button, where you pause the button at the top, and
they all groan, don't they?
They all just go, oh, but it's time where I can then get the question up on the screen and actually unpick it with the children there and then. So you're addressing the gaps there and then. Also, LBQ, the resource library that's there on LBQ is absolutely fantastic, and it's just saved me so much time because, it's not going off and finding the resources in different places. It's not going and spending time at the photocopier. Everything is there for you, and the children are just so engaged, and I found children that, I found it hard to keep on track for the whole of the lesson, are engaged with LBQ because it's that fun way of learning, and addressing those gaps.
They don't even realise they're doing it, do they?
Oh, they don't. And, the amount of children now, it's like, oh, when are we going to do LBQ again? It's absolutely fantastic. And the way that they can support each other with it as well, is doing it on their own. It's just, all I can say, just an absolute game changer. I just wish I found it earlier, but not looking back, looking forward.
Yeah. Well,
brilliant.
I think one of the things you touched on there is just what we've both Sophie and Lizzie both touched on the fact that actually a huge amount of your workload, guys, this year is going to be reaching back into those earlier learning objectives and finding resources to fit those. That's going to be a mammoth task for you. And with Learning by Question, you do have access to all of those as well. Sophie, you know, have you got any examples of like how this has affected, you know, specific children maybe?
Yeah, I had a child last year actually, or the year before actually, who came in, was new to the school, really seemed to struggle with maths and writing, wouldn't put anything on paper. And I wrongly assumed that he was really struggling at maths, and so would give him, you know, much simpler work and offer lots of help. And he was really resistant to it. And then we did an LBQ lesson, and the level of maths that was coming out was just amazing. And I realized it was almost a cognitive overload for him to be writing and forming his numbers properly and putting them in the boxes, you know, all the things you like to get out of written presentation in maths. Suddenly that stress was taken away, and he just loved the fact that it was on a computer, and he just shone. And it really changed my opinion and changed my planning and everything of how to teach this child maths, because he just suddenly shone. It was amazing.
I think that is why we all get out of bed in the morning, even in these windy days. It's stories like that. And you know, last year we had John from the amazing John from Brown Hills West, and literally his cohort, he had to drive around and pick them up in his cars, and then they came in. I mean, Lindsay, you're looking at me like, yeah, I've been there. I've picked them up in the car, and then they've come into school and they've hidden underneath the desks, and they just do not want to engage with it. And then they've run something like this. It's like, you know, genuinely is assessments without anxiety. And the next thing, they're knocking on your door asking for a breakfast club, and it has genuinely changed kids' lives. And thought, I'm going to go on to high school, because that's just one thing, isn't it? But we're actually preparing these children to go on to the next chapter of their education, and hopefully they can go on to the next chapter of their education full of confidence and thinking, Sophie, like your little boy, I can actually do this. I'm actually smart. I can actually do maths, which would be lovely. Now, this is how it kind of works normally. So we've got this diagnostic. But Kate, we've stepped it up, haven't we, from last year? Because once the children run a diagnostic and you've got a kind of QLA like this, what else can we do with it?
So what happens next is that the platform will analyze the data from your pupils' answers on the diagnostic, and then it will automatically identify the 3 main misconceptions that your class has. So as you can see up there, it offers you resources then to address those gaps. And each resource is scaffolded. So we're not just going to now bombard children with more questions of exactly the same type that they got wrong. Sure. So if you got past tense verbs question incorrect on a diagnostic, you won't just be sent a ton of past tense verbs questions. The teacher can choose to allocate a mastery question set, so you can take pupils right back to understanding and identifying verbs, so your foundations can be rebuilt from there. The platform suggests appropriate work according to your class's misconceptions, but the teacher is always in control of that. They can always choose whether or not to assign that question set to the class. And you can add these suggestions of follow-up work into your diary. You can set it as independent work. You can use it for your booster groups, your intervention sessions, or for individual work, or you can just add it to your springboard scheme for future teaching. And so, in a nutshell, that's how the platform's going to address your class gaps in a nutshell, Heather.
That's amazing. So it's taking you on from that QLA, it's finding what the actual objectives are that you need, that your class really needs to focus on. And then it's doing that running around for you. It's reaching back into that resource library and it's pulling out the appropriate kind of resource that you might want to use to fill it. So imagine that now. We don't need any other textbooks. We don't need any other photocopying. We don't need you to spend hours and hours into the evening doing your QLA, and we've saved you hours and hours of time there. And we've actually, we've pinpointed gaps and we've filled those gaps as well. So for those people who are interested, we have already run this diagnostic now. So thousands of children have run the very first maths diagnostic and the very first GPS diagnostic. And what that means is that we can kind of peer into what's happening in year 6 classrooms all over the UK, and we can have a look at some of the gaps or some of the things that are coming up and some of the challenges that our little year 6s out there are already facing right now. So, Kate,
Yeah, so
What have
we've
we got
had
insights wise?
yeah, we have. We've had hundreds of pupils complete the first few springboards now. So I've taken a couple of questions from GPS2 diagnostic and share with you a couple of the questions that were trickiest for our year sixes. So the hardest question for pupils on GPS2 was question 14. And this question's asking pupils to type one word to show the changing room belongs to all of the girls. So only 32% of our pupils could use an apostrophe correctly to show possession at the end of that plural word there. The most common misconception was to enter the plural word with no apostrophes whatsoever. And 30% of children did that. And another common misconception was to use the apostrophe before the S rather than
This
after
is what I
it.
would have done, Kate. I'd have done this.
You and many others, I suspect, Heather. 19% of our pupils made that mistake. But this is an objective from the punctuation taught in year 4. And so without regular retrieval and revision, it's totally understandable that pupils have forgotten the rules around possessive apostrophes for plurals. And I mean, we do know many adults struggle with this as well, don't we, to be fair?
Yeah. So just this question before this is something that you guys can try. You can use this, can't you? You could put that. You could put this question up in front of your year sixes tomorrow and see. You know, are your year six in that 32% who used that apostrophe correctly? Remember, this is a year 4 objective, but it has been a little while, and we have got all the COVID to deal with.
For pupils who struggled with this question, teachers could choose to assign a mastery set using apostrophes for plural possession, or a revision set, a punctuation topic review set. Another tricky question on GPS2 was asking pupils to identify 2 determiners in a sentence, and only 37% of pupils could answer this correctly. This is a word class objective taught in year 3, so it could have been an age ago to a 10-year-old. A common misconception here was to identify the verb invited as well as the as the determiner. So pupils here would probably benefit with some help with understanding the relationship between determiners and nouns. And for those pupils, teachers could choose to allocate the mastery set use determiners, or if they thought it was more suitable, as a practice set called practice identifying articles. We can also see the overall mean and mode scores for Springboard GPS 1 there on the slide. And the difference between them is interesting because it does look like while there are plenty of pupils who are secure with the bulk of the year 1 to 5 content, there are even more pupils with low scores to pull that mean down. So the challenge is, how do you cater for both of those groups at once? And we'll find out more about that in a minute, maybe.
Yeah, I just absolutely find these insights just really fascinating. And for people who are interested in these insights and for benchmarking questions that you might want to use with your year 6 class, especially as we go through this year, we're going to have another webinar in January that's just about these insights. So you can see, how are you guys getting along compared to what's happening in the rest of the UK? You know, if you're finding that, we're seeing the same kind of gaps, you know, in our classes, please do share that on the comments then, you know, just reassure people that they're not alone. But we can see this over thousands and thousands of children, that for the GPS now, we've got some children that are really able, but we've got some children that, you know, are really struggling with this. We've got 2 very different kind of groups that are starting to form across the UK. And how are you going to cope with that once you're in the classroom? Daryl, what's it looking like for maths? Because everybody was saying at the beginning of this, you know, webinar that, maths is the struggle at the moment.
Yeah, thanks. Really interesting. It's been a definite eye-opener having a good dig through these. I've probably spent way too long having a good look at them. Maybe some of them are a bit less surprising if you've taught year 6 for a long time, but as there's hardly any year 6 content in our first diagnostic, it's a good one to use early. So one of the first ones that's caused a lot of issues is quite a simple fraction on a number line. Many year 6 pupils have struggled with this. In fact, for 90% of classes, it was one of their top 3 areas that they needed to address. So that implies that the basic understanding of fractions, quite a few people saying it on the chat before as well, it just isn't there yet. And certainly if it was presented in a slightly unfamiliar way, not on a shape, on a number line, for example, causing some issues. And the second one, fundamental knowledge really going into year 6, the decimal equivalent of 3/4. Very straightforward, you know, they're not tricky word problems, they're very, very straightforward. Bit of fundamental knowledge there. Top misconception being 3.4, as you might expect, but that indicates that children just have no idea about what a fraction is at all. The last one was perhaps a bit less surprising. It was question 20. The last one is a multi-step problem. They had to calculate the area of that shape there. There was some missing side lengths as well. So that does kind of indicate how our diagnostics are structured as well. They're not just all very simple questions. They do build, there's some problem solving in there as well. So the first two, particularly interesting, because as Sophie explained a few slides earlier, fractions is one of the most heavily tested content domains, and also it pops up in other areas of the curriculum as well. So not having that basic understanding of even year 3 and 4 objectives indicates that there's far more significant problems that are going to come, unfortunately, once you get onto the year 5 and 6 fractions work as well. So got to quickly address those, you know, as quickly as we possibly can. Overall, the mean score of 11.8 was pretty good. You know, children aren't completely starting from scratch. They have remembered some things. The mode was quite close to that, but it does suggest that there's already about 9 gaps for a typical year 6 pupil at the moment, and that's at the very start of year 6, just from the year 3 to 5 content. So it really is an uphill battle for year 6 teachers from the off, which I think we were hearing about a lot on the chat earlier on. So those classes, sorry, clicked it a bit too soon. Those classes all had mastery question sets suggested for them, which go right back to basics, pictorial representations, build them right up until they're at the appropriate level. So now I'll pass back to you, Heather.
Thank you. I just want to reassure everybody who's watching this that you can access Learning by Questions for free. We are funded by a charity for 6 weeks, for half a term. And within that, for free, you would get the first 3 diagnostics in maths and the first 3 diagnostics in GPS. So you could run these and you could benchmark and you could see where your children are at, and you could see whether that matches with what we've been going through tonight in terms of what we're seeing across the whole of the country there. Sophie, you put 1 or 2 of these questions out on the social, didn't you? And you found there was actually almost like a kind of emotive response from lots of teachers trying them with their year 6 class and so on.
Yeah, there was a particularly strong response from the fraction one, which I think popped up earlier actually, and Darryl showed it on a number line, and the children had to place the fraction. And again, I believe the most common misconception was counting the lines instead of the sections, which I know my children do all the time. But I was quite shocked to see that that was the most incorrectly answered question. I think a lot of other year 6 teachers were as well, and sort of was a real shock to the system. And kind of, I know I gave it to my class the next day thinking, please tell me that you can do this, and then very quickly covered it in the lesson. So yeah, it provoked a lot of discussion from people.
I think that's going to be that is the truth of what we're doing here, and you'll be able to run these diagnostics and find out for yourself exactly where your class is and what they know, and then we'll come back to you in January and go, how's that looking against everybody else? But like I said, you can have a half a term, you can have 6 weeks completely free with Learning by Questions, and you can run the diagnostics for yourself and find out how your children are getting on. So what I'm interested in is we can see that these are the gaps, the national gaps that are starting to form really clear, and they certainly mesh with what people were saying in the comments at the beginning of the webinar. And how does that overlap? What's the Venn diagram like between Sophie's analysis of what's likely to come up and where the gaps currently are, Darryl? I think we have a slide, don't we, to compare the two. Here we are. Filling in our gaps, building our skyscrapers. So yeah, I don't think there's going to be a lot of massive surprises here about the maths. We've got the fractions in there, and that is the largest, content domain that's likely to come up. Well, not the second largest, with 25%. And then over in GPS, we've got G1 and G5. They're the heavy hitters, and that is where we're seeing the gaps already. So as Darryl and Kay have pointed out, we are kind of looking like, the gaps are fitting where we're going to need most of the learning to happen. All right, so we've sorted out our wobbly foundations. we've got a way of running a perfect diagnostic and seeing where our kids are, and we've got a brilliant way of filling the gaps. But how are we going to get to those higher levels? How are we going to get into, that skyscraper territory? Well, I think it's something that I don't know that human beings could actually do by themselves, but it is to individualize so that every single child in your class is getting exactly the right piece of learning for them. So you're tweaking it and correcting their journey as they go. So, Sophie, that sounds like it's impossible to do without completely losing your marbles. What do you think? Is it possible?
Well, I haven't ever been able to achieve it before. I remember my mum taught for about 40 years, and she always told me this analogy of it's kind of like throwing a blanket or parachute over your class. You're always going to, get the majority and miss out maybe the top 10% and the bottom 10%. And it's not ideal, but never in every lesson can you hit with your lesson, every single child. You've just got to do as much as you can. And I think it's only humanly possible to do the majority. No one could ever do every single child in every lesson.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine that the weight of that responsibility is a lot, Lindsay. You leave the classroom, you think, oh, I just didn't quite get round this person and this person. And the guilt plays a role. You're on mute, though. Lindsay, I can't hear you because you're on mute.
Oh, chatting away then.
Yeah, no, it was very insightful. I thought it was genius, but nobody else could hear it. So.
I'm glad. No, you do feel guilty because you go into teaching, to support every child to make progress. And Sophie, as you've said, it's just not possible. There's always going to be those groups that you can't hit, and you want to do it, in every lesson. And that's where LBQ comes in, because we'll talk about, the independent learning. So, it leads into that you can, set tasks for children to complete independent learning to address those gaps.
So prepare to feel better, everybody, because Daryl's going to show us now that we've filled those class gaps in, how are we going to help all these individual pupils, Daryl, without going completely insane.
Thanks. So, see here, it's back to the analyze section again. So you can see we've already dealt with the three most important gaps for the class based on the SATS topic priority. We set homework for one, quick bit of homework, a little bit of practice. We're going to deal with one in the future as a full class. That's something we really want to get right. And then we've set ourselves a reminder for the future. But annoyingly, perhaps, not every pupil in a class will have the exact same three gaps to work on. It'd be lovely if that did happen, but we all know that they've all got their own individual areas they need to work on. So, as well as the class gaps, it will also look at each individual pupil, and it will find three areas for improvement, and again has recommended tasks to fill those needs. So if we look at Olivia Garcia here, you can see that question 7 and question 11 have already been dealt with as whole class revisits. So we're not going to set her the same work again. She's got 3 more tasks based on her own individual needs. So there's fractions, one popping up again. Lots of pupils have been assigned that. And these are prioritised in line with the most important SATS topics. So early year group content is going to be suggested first, again, building the foundation for future successful learning. And the most heavily weighted topics are also taking priority over those smaller topics like position and direction. However, the teacher is always in control of these, and they can review them, and they can decide if it is appropriate or not. It's not a case that we've got some hidden AI monster making decisions about your class that you have no control over. So if you look at James Anderson up here, for example, he's normally really good at adding, especially mentally. So really not sure what's gone on here. So we can review his answer. Okay. So all he's done is he's subtracted instead of added. So maybe that question set's not appropriate for him. Or maybe if you wanted to teach him a lesson, maybe you could make him do the whole question set, and then he might remember next time. So what about and it is often a very small group of pupils that get absolutely everything right. They've had an absolutely perfect education. COVID wasn't an issue. They've remembered absolutely everything. What about them? What should they do? Well, let's have a look at Isabella. So it's recognised she's got them all right, and it's suggested some greater depth question sets for her, some reasoning, some problem solving. And all of these are quite short sets. There's just 10 questions in each one. But they are guaranteed to make even the fastest workers really think deeply about the problems. So when you're happy with all the suggestions, you've got a nice simple button up at the top there. You just press that, choose an end date, perhaps give it a couple of weeks or so, something like that. Little note if you want, and then press save. And bingo, by doing that, you've now assigned over 70 precisely targeted individual pieces of scaffolded work with barely any effort in your part. And it's on top of the 3 most important class gaps that we dealt with earlier.
That's incredible. And there's just no way that I think a human being could do that, is to set over 70 pieces of work in that amount of time. And then you know that each of those is completely targeted, is working at the right pitch and pace for every single individual child there. And I think that probably speaks to some of the things that we were hearing on the chat at the very beginning about, you know, engagement, about behavior, about settling kids, because if every child is being engaged at just the right level for them, that's surely going to help a little bit with that classroom management. Sophie, you've been running some of these individualized pupil suggestions, haven't you? Do you know what I mean? I think you'd run the first diagnostic and it was like, home for a glass of vino, and like, okay, where are we at? Do you know what I mean? And I think it's really important to share that, because actually I was able to tell you that quite a lot of people have run a first diagnostic and gone, eek, you know, but it doesn't leave you there, does it? It goes, okay, now we're going to start to fix those.
Yeah.
So how's that been for you and your kids?
It's been really handy, particularly at the moment in GPS, because there are some, you know, gaps going right back to like year 2. And obviously, if you've only got 1 or 2 children with those gaps, it's not possible to address those in class. You don't have enough intervention time to do that. So being able to set individualized tasks, and the children really like it as well, because, you know, it's nice when they've all got the same task, they can work together. But actually, when they know that the teacher's kind of seen what they need help with and what they've got in front of them is exactly for their needs, they've been kind of really getting their heads down, getting on with it. And they know that they're doing what's best for them. So it's really been great, and obviously so much easier for me.
Yeah, I mean, how much time has that saved you? And also just how it feels to know that everybody's getting perfectly targeted pieces of work that you can see, and you're in control as well. We're not handing this over to some kind of crazy computer system that's sending your kids off in lots of directions.
Yeah, it's what you want to do in an ideal world, isn't it? Having every child have individualized work for them, but that just isn't possible in normal day-to-day classroom life without this.
Without this, but it is for everybody who's joining here today, because you can take the SAT Springboard for 6 weeks and use it in your class. Lindsay, now you took SAT Springboard last year, before we had all of this special bells and whistles that we've had, but just fundamentally the really strong parts, simple parts that work for people. Now you took it for 6 weeks. What happened to progress in your class in just the 6 weeks?
Well, in just that 6 weeks, I mean, we had a percentage increase of 34% of children working at ARE. It's on there on the screen now as well, isn't it? And 36% increase in maths. And that was massive for us. I mean, it was the highest in maths that we've had for years. And again, that goes back to the question sets that are there and the confidence that was instilled in the children. So the combination of both. And I said, if I just wish we had it earlier.
Yeah.
Honestly, everybody that I speak to, it's like, oh, it's LBQ again. It's LBQ. They just know. And the proof's in the pudding, isn't it? If you can see the results, you know, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, I have to say, we have had a lot of schools that say that they were able to get 20-30% amount of progress in the ARE in just the time that they had for the trial. So just in that half term. So it's definitely worth doing, even if you feel like you can't maybe take it on from that. But imagine getting 20% as you did, 30% progress for absolutely free, just trialing LBQ and just using it and see what it happens, you know, for your class. Okay, let's look at the key takeaways now, because I think we're running all right for time. We're just a couple of minutes behind. I've got Paul going, come on. So let's just sum up. What have we learned today then? Okay, key takeaways. Number 1, we need to secure those wobbly foundations. We're going to be reaching into those earlier year groups, and we're going to need to get a lot of resources so we can fill those gaps from earlier in the curriculum. There's no point in racing on into year 6 until we've got those sorted. Number 2, we need to consider the most prominent objectives tested, and we need to check those too. All of that juicy information that Sophie gave us about what's likely to come up. I think we might have mentioned poetry, but actually, no, realistically, Daryl's put some on there. You need to go and make sure that those things are really well covered with your class. They're going to come up, in this year's SATs papers. Number 3, try not to test what you haven't taught yet. That doesn't mean to say you've got to race through all of the Year 6 curriculum now before Christmas and then revise the SATs. It means you need to find a really smart way of getting some diagnostics that do not burn through confidence at this point of the academic year. Number 4, we need some diagnostics done right. They're going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you this year, guys. They're going to be your key aid. It is worth having a look at this and investing in this. Number 5, it is possible, it is humanly possible to address those gaps now at an individual level so that every single child is reaching their potential for the big day. And you'll not be surprised to find out that number 6 is that we really think that if you're not going to go insane and you're going to be able to take all these shortcuts, you'll want to jump on the SAT Springboard trial this year and take 6 weeks, just like Lindsay did last year. And Lindsay, have you regretted that moment?
You don't even need to ask me that. It's very clear that I haven't. And and now we've got the diagnostics as well. It's just improved it even further. Amazing.
You've not got anything to lose, have you?
No. And the proof's there. The percentage increase, it was there. It works.
It absolutely does work. And I really do hope that you guys feel like you can do SATs differently this year. What I would say to you is get your trial sorted out with us as soon as possible. What we find is a lot of people will go, I tell you what we'll do. We'll take that 6-week trial and we'll do it in the new year. So we'll come back after Christmas and I'll do it in January. And then last January, we did have 20 to 30 schools a day, every single day, hope to start their trial straight away. And then they couldn't, and then they were disappointed and they had to wait 2 or 3 weeks to get going. So I would really strongly suggest that you get in, you start talking to us about getting your trial set up ASAP now. Even if you want to have a start date that's later, but let's have the meeting with you sooner rather than later. So Daryl's put really helpfully, he's put the next steps, join the SAT Springboard trial there. Like I said, it is 6 weeks, it's half a term, it's completely free. We can do this because we're funded by a charity. You get the first 3 maths diagnostics and all of those suggested next tasks for your children in maths, and you get exactly the same in the GPS. During this time, you also have access to our entire library. So that is every curriculum objective for Key Stage 2. I think we've got something like 130 reading texts as well in there. So lots of beautiful short reads. There's White Rose maths in there. So imagine just how much time and energy this is going to save you by jumping in. You've got absolutely nothing to lose. Lindsay doesn't regret it. Sophie doesn't regret it. So you have a go too.